Okay, Studio Growth Essentials. My thesis on this, what I think that every single studio needs in order to thrive is a profitable lesson package, a predictable source of students, and a repeatable enrollment process. We're going to go into a lot of details on those things in a second, but I want to put a little disclaimer on this conversation that success for your studio, or what thriving means to you, or what full is in your schedule, is going to be completely different studio to studio. There's a lot of different factors here. Your schedule might be one. Not everyone just teaches full time and as their sole source of revenue and income. Obviously, a lot of us are performing. We might have other jobs outside of teaching and performance, or even outside of music. This is something that varies widely. So when we talk about having a full studio, I want you to think of your definition of full. It doesn't have to be my definition, which, like I said, was that 26 hours a week. It's not what I do now. Obviously, I have a few other things on my plate right now, so I don't teach quite full time anymore. But it also is important that when we talk about the thriving and full studio, we're taking into account differences in the instrumentation. For example, it's really common for woodwind, brass, string, percussion, and piano to sit closer to 20 to 25 hours a week as a full-time, teaching schedule and revenue goal for them. It's a lot more common for a voice instructor, for example, to sit closer to 15 to 18 hours a week. And a lot of that is fatigue. Like, there's just only so much that you can do. So it's okay if that varies, whatever your goals are. That's something that on the strategy sessions too, we do a lot, is just do the math for you and what would that number of hours look like, depending on the revenue goals that you have and how we can make that happen. So it's a wide array of success and definitions here. But like I said, summer's a great time for us to build a studio. So it's also a great time to shape your ideal schedule. If you want to no longer teach on Fridays, summer's a good time to kind of shuffle everything around and prepare students for that too. So we've got a lot of options and opportunities here. We'll start with the profitable lesson package first. And when I say package, I don't necessarily mean like a buy 10 lessons, get a slight discount kind of a package. In my mind, I'm thinking two different packages. Your hourly rate primarily is a package because it doesn't just include the time that we're actually spending with students in the lessons. There's a lot of other things that go into teaching a student. It's all the admin time. It's the time that you're spending on marketing and trying to add students to the studio. It's time that you're spending on researching material, researching repertoire for them, answering emails, communicating with families, planning recitals. There's so many things that go into that hourly rate. We want to make sure it's all accounted for and you're compensated for all of it. So right now in the US, the industry standard for lessons is around $1 per minute. So if you're teaching an hour-long lesson, it's about $60, 45 for 45 minutes, $30 for 30 minutes. But it's also really common, depending on where you live, your education experience, additional value and demand for that to increase. I know I put this big long list on here. I would say the most important factor, number one, in your rate beyond that dollar a minute standard is going to be cost of living. If you live in a more expensive area, it's not only more expensive for you to live there and therefore provide your service, but also the market has a higher tolerance. So the rates in those areas will be higher to accommodate higher cost of living needs, but it will also be higher because the market will bear that. So when we look at average cost of living, this is one where I'm happy to give more specific examples. If you guys are looking for some advice on your rates, we can definitely have that conversation. I'm happy to dive into some of those numbers. But when we talk about average cost of living, it's helpful to look at median home price as a way to kind of figure out what that cost of living adjustment can look like. We can certainly use some examples too. If anyone wants to be the example, feel free to let me know in the chat and I can give you guys a quick rundown of what that looks like. Demand is probably the second one that's the most impactful. If your studio is full, it's a great time to raise your rates because you've got, a full studio, hopefully a little bit of a wait list. You've got some cushion there. And obviously students want to be working with you. So demand can certainly drive the rates up higher. And then education experience, this is going to help us get to that baseline dollar per minute. So when I say like industry standard, I'm kind of assuming that everyone has either a 4-year degree in music, whether it's performance or education or something along those lines, or equivalent experience. You do not have to have a degree in music to teach. And honestly, in a lot of disciplines and a lot of genres, there just aren't degree programs for those things. So even jazz studies is a newer degree program in the US, and it's not something that outside of the US is nearly as popular or prevalent right now. So it might not mean that you have a degree, but you might have been teaching for a long time or have a significant performance background and maybe have taken students on the side. So if you feel like you have experience and you are confident in your teaching on some level, then $1 a minute is probably a great place to start. Obviously, we just increase from there. If you're in a cost of living area that's lower than the US average, it might drive tuition down a little bit, but I'll be honest, it's pretty rare if I'm talking to someone in the US that we actually price anyone below that $1 a minute. So if you are on the fence or if you would, think that maybe there's a price increase coming your way, I would definitely look at doing that come fall. When we talk about the summer retention and summer attrition, summer is not always a great time to make big changes, especially to current students. The other part of the package is your tuition payment. If you follow me on social media, you know that I am very passionate about monthly flat rate tuition. I listed a few other options here. We can do a per lesson weekly payment where either they're giving you cash or check at a lesson, or you can use a program like Fonz, for example, that will automatically pull funds from the student at the end of each lesson. It's a helpful thing. It's a great option and a great tool, but it's not something that is super consistent when we're trying to look for stability and predictability in our income. Kind of hit or miss, not ideal. We can also look at proactive monthly or retroactive monthly payment, meaning the beginning or the end of the month for the lessons that are happening in that month. Between the two of these, I would pick proactive every time. By having students prepay, you're incentivizing them to actually attend their lessons, but also it's just a little bit easier for us to enforce any attendance policies or cancellation policies we have to make sure that you're getting paid for the time that you're reserving. We can also do semester or annual payment, big batches of payment up front. It depends on the students that you're working with. This does not always work for everyone's budget. Honestly, the reason that I tend to stay away from this is because it's harder for the teachers planning. When you've got a big chunk of money, but then you're not going to get paid again for 4 months, I think for a lot of people that can cause early in our financial growth, it can cause some hiccups. So just be aware of that. Like, I know it's really helpful. We've got them locked in for the semester, but it also can, maybe cause some conflict later on if they want to leave, or it might mean that we've got students that turn over a lot at the semester. And so it's kind of a weird in between where we've got some stability because they've paid up front, but then also when that term ends, we don't know if they're continuing, even if we ask, it's kind of up in the air until we get the next tuition for the next term again. So again, it can cause a little bit of anxiety, I think, for a lot of teachers to be in that holding pattern, in addition to the fact that we have to plan ahead. So the reason I like monthly flat rate is that it looks at your entire calendar year and it averages out that total annual tuition into 12 equal monthly installments. And then you can put people on auto pay. I'm a massive fan of automatic payment. I personally use Duet Partner, which is a studio management software to manage this, and that pairs with Stripe. If you guys are using Venmo, especially the friends and family on Venmo or friends and family on PayPal, or if you're using Zelle, I'd be very cautious. Make sure that you're actually following the terms of service. You do have to be paying the transaction fees for that. And it's something that both the card processors and the US government are actually cracking down on right now. If you're outside the US, Stripe can still work in some countries. Obviously, check and cash are always still a really good option if you want to just accept payment off of that subscription. You could also look at things like Wise. Your PayPal, again, is always a really good option. There's definitely some flexibility here in the payment processing, but I would make sure that you're using a business payment processor and following the terms of service to avoid any disruptions, any hiccups, any breach of the terms of service too. So if you're looking at a virtual lesson studio and all of your lessons are going to be online, I would definitely do the monthly flat rate, so that you got everyone on subscription. You can't take check or cash in this case, so it's really nice to have that. It also helps to enforce everything. When we're looking at the pricing though, it really depends on where you live and where the students live that you're trying to target. So it's really common in the studios that we've seen that are virtual exclusively to either price based on their local, and I know right now you guys are not local. I know you're actually traveling a lot, just like Anna is. You guys are kind of on the road. So it might not be ideal to price in your local area, but that is always an option. The other thing that I've seen people do is, because virtual lessons are always going to be more popular in larger cities, students are looking to avoid traffic. They don't want to have to drive to another lesson. Maybe it's not just a parent that's driving them. If we're looking at New York and LA, we do tend to have a lot of nannies getting students to activities or coordinating activities and schedules. When we're dealing with those types of situations, we want to be charging the premium for that area. So not just charging based on where you live, but if most of your students are going to be in New York, or if you want to target that area for your marketing and for your growth, then I would be looking at pricing according to New York prices, which if you take New York or LA, for example, for a piano lesson, a lot of the time we're looking somewhere between 85 up to about $120 an hour as a baseline. If it's a high demand studio, if we're working with more advanced students or working more with professionals, then we can start to push into like that $150 to $200 an hour range too. So there is a lot of spread here in the hourly rates. I know that sometimes it can make it really tempting to just like only go virtual in some of those areas too, but make sure that if we're offering lessons again at $150 an hour online only, we're working with the right target demographic. And also we've got a really solid setup for online lessons. So sometimes that additional value piece is kind of what drives that more. I want to compare two different categories of actions that we can take in our marketing efforts. And so I'm going to label one kind of the glass of water. These are things that they can have really fast success, but we have to constantly be refilling it. And then we've got the well, which is something that we can, dig once and then keep pulling from it ongoing indefinitely. The glass of water, this is going to be things like matchmaking agencies. So think about things like outschool.com, takelessons.com, Thumbtack, Thumbtack and Bark are kind of similar processes. When we look at Outschool or Take Lessons, a lot of times, or even lessons.com, they're going to take a portion out of your tuition. So if you set your rate at $60 an hour, they're going to take 30% out of that as their cut for finding the students and hosting the lessons and doing the marketing for you. Candidly, I think that's too high. I know there's some newer programs like Forte Connect Lessons is trying to drop that a little bit. I think they're closer to 25%. My theory on this is, why would I pay out 25% when I can just do a little extra work up front and get all of those students myself? And then I don't have to pay any percentage out. I get 100% of it. So that's definitely my preference. And when we're looking at a profitable studio, our expenses, what we're trying to aim for is to keep all of our expenses below 20%. So that includes if you're renting a studio space, if you've got subscriptions, we really want to stay in that 20 to 25% range. So if we're paying out 30%, and then we also have to have equipment, and we also have to have music, and maybe we also have to have a space, it's really eating into our bottom line. Thumbtack and Bark are a little bit different. They don't take a cut. They actually charge you to talk to a potential student. And this is something, I think during the pandemic, all these were thriving a lot more. People were taking more online lessons. But now there's this mindset that we're hearing from a lot of students that was their COVID thing. That's what they did in 2020. They don't necessarily use those things now, or they don't even think to use them as much now. So we can find students directly. That's totally possible. And I would encourage you to try to go that route. And especially when we're talking about Thumbtack or Bark, where you have to pay to talk to a lead, we don't even know if they are still looking. They might have already found a teacher and just not updated their profile. It's also possible on some of these sites that there's scammers, like there's other negative things that can come with this. And I would hate to see you waste money. So if these are working for you, awesome. If you're not using them right now, I think there's other places that we can put our time and energy and investment to have a lot more success ongoing. Paid advertising is another one of those categories. I will make my stance here abundantly clear. I'm staunchly against paid advertising, especially for an individual studio owner. If you are a multi-teacher studio owner, meaning you've hired other people, you have a larger studio, paid advertising seasonally absolutely can make sense. A well-placed Google ad for fall enrollment, for example, or for a specific summer camp that you're running can be helpful. But again, if you didn't go to school for marketing, the technical writing and the experimentation on this, it adds up. You're experimenting with your money. You're spending money to see what works. In good advertising, we're running what we call A/B testing, meaning you might run two versions of the same ad with one tiny little tweak. And we're putting money behind those things to see what people react to the best. This takes time, it takes energy, and it takes financial investment, which again is not ideal for someone that's just starting or has a smaller studio. And if you're only looking for maybe that 25 hours a week of teaching, it's not the first place that I would be going. I put on here for paid advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, it's gonna be print ads, YouTube ads, Google Maps pack listings and paid boosting there. It could be billboards if you really wanted it to be, but I would in general hit pause on those things. What I would keep from this list is social media. So I put on here Facebook groups, Nextdoor, and then Instagram and TikTok, which I think is really, really helpful. When we look at Facebook groups, if you are teaching locally, I'd be looking for local groups in your area. Same thing with Nextdoor. If you're not familiar with Nextdoor, I know this is available in the US and Canada for our European friends or friends abroad. It's not as prevalent, and I don't think it's operating, for example, in Serbia right now. I'm so sorry. But Nextdoor is cool because it just draws a little radius around your house, and only people in that bubble can see what you're posting, and you can only see posts from that area too. When we're talking about Facebook groups and Nextdoor for local promotion, we can expand Facebook groups beyond your local area, but most of these places are going to ask, or most of these groups rather, are going to ask, do you live here? And obviously we don't want to be weird or unethical and lying in those responses. So giving, honest answers is really helpful. Whatever you're posting, make sure it is student-centered copy. The biggest misstep that I see here is that teachers will start posting in social media, like in Facebook groups, and they're only talking about themselves, where they got their degree, what their background is, who their teachers were, there's the successes that they've created for their students. That's unfortunately just not what students are buying. And I think this is a big misconception that a lot of us have in marketing. We're not selling ourselves. It's not an audition. It's not like our performance career. What people are choosing to buy in lessons is the experience of working with you. What does it feel like to be a student? What does it feel like to be in lessons with you? Is the teacher fun? Are they engaging? Is it exciting to come to lessons every week? Are they supportive and encouraging? So a great way to do that is to frame your post copy around what your students tend to say about you, and also feature testimonials. That's always a really great tip there. I like Instagram and TikTok. I think if I was going to pick one to spend more time and energy in, just seeing what we're seeing in our business, I'm actually a really big fan of TikTok for social media growth and organic marketing. If you're not into using TikTok or Instagram or creating short form video, please don't feel like you have to start that right now. It's a great thing to do kind of down the line. It does take a lot of repetitive effort and energy. If you're passionate about it, awesome. And if you're not, also awesome. That is totally fine. The well would be mutually beneficial relationships with key people in your community. And when we talk about mutually beneficial relationships, what I mean is that we're not emailing school music teachers or band directors and saying, do you have students that are interested in lessons? Those cold emails go unanswered. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. If you have, please let me know in the chat. By the way, I do see some questions about online lessons. If we have time, we can certainly come to that one today. It's not totally part of the focus right now, but if we have time at the end, I will totally circle back to online lesson tips. But yes, a lot of us have emailed school music teachers to little to no avail. It's pretty rare that we get some responses there. What does help is building a mutually beneficial relationship where we're not just coming in and asking for help or asking for favors, but we're offering help and we're offering support first. So this might be school music programs, band, orchestra, choir, general music. It might be homeschool co-ops and networks in your local area. This could also be, Girl Scouts and Boy Scout troops, church music programs, performing arts and visual arts organizations, think like dance studios, art classes, local theater groups, for example. This also can be other local musicians and private instructors. When we talk about the mutual relationship, when I approach any of these people, it's not, I need help, or please give me students, or do you have anyone that might be interested in working with me? My first question always is, what do you need? How can I help you? What would support your program right now? And when we're looking at summer, I know we're kind of cutting it close on the end of the school year for a lot of us, but now is a great time to be establishing these relationships because the response rate actually is higher right now. It's a stressful time of the year for a lot of teachers. I know Leanna used to work, for example, in the school system, so I'm sure she can attest to this, but it is a really wild time of the year. We've got last minute recitals, end of the year recitals. We've got grading. We're trying to get through everything. Our students are just checked out a lot of the time by the time we get to mid-May. So for a lot of these teachers, they are looking for other resources. They are looking for more engaging material and instruction. You might be able to go in and be a guest instructor if that's helpful. You might be able to talk about some summer programming that you're offering that could help retain information in the students' minds over the summer and help them apply it in a different way. We might have, intro classes or other things that we can offer too. So make sure we're giving some ideas, but also asking, what do they need? What would help them be successful? We're still not going to have everyone respond. Even everyone on this list, they have their own agendas. We're talking about a lot of the homeschool co-ops or scout troops, for example, they're volunteers. we are not going to get even close to 100% response rate, but we are going to increase the responses that we get when we approach it from this very like servant leadership. How can I help? How can I support your program kind of attitude? All right, talk about a repeatable enrollment process next. And when we talk about our enrollment process, this is going to be the initial outreach. This would also be a kind of meet and greet, maybe with some interview and assessment. We want to make sure that the goals are aligned. We want to set expectations for lessons, and then also talk about commitment and policies. This enrollment process can look different depending on what your goals are for your studio and what stage you're at in your studio growth and development. So for example, I always run a consultation with a new student. That consultation for me, by definition, has no playing involved. And again, if you weren't here at the beginning, I'm a clarinet teacher. I don't bring students in for a trial clarinet lesson. What I want to do instead is interview them. I want to make sure that this is actually a good fit, that I like the personality, that we do get to get along really well, that if there's parents involved, depending on the age of the student, that is a good fit, and that the mom and the dad or the guardian and I are going to have a good working relationship. And I also want to make sure I know what the student's goals are. We can get really particular and really specific in this interview about what we want to see in ideal students by really honing in on who we want to be working with the most. So think about the students that you're already working with and try to define some of the things that make them a fantastic student and make them someone that you feel really connected to. And when you talk about ideal students in my studio, as an example, I love working with students that are really high anxiety. And this might be high performance anxiety, this might be high general anxiety. So when I meet with a student for the first time, I want to ask them things like, what brings them joy in school, and what do they like a little bit less in school, or what are some things they don't find as much joy in, and why? So they're telling me that, as an example, maybe math class isn't something they enjoy as much. I usually follow that up by asking why. Why don't we enjoy math as much? And some of my students, again, things I'm listening for as an ideal student, a lot of times they'll tell me, well, math just, it makes me really nervous. It's something I enjoy. There's a lot of pressure and you have to do timed tests and it's just kind of scary. I'm listening for language like that, where they're telling me that things make them a little cautious, a little nervous. And that language to me is signaling that we have some anxiety that we can work through. And I love using music as a way to work through that anxiety and help build some confidence in my students. That might not be your ideal student, though. Maybe you're looking for really advanced students or very serious and dedicated students. And we ask about their goals, why they want to be in lessons. They'll tell you that information. They'll share details about what they want to work on. So it's helpful to just ask those things. And I've always found in a consultation, I have more time to do that in depth than I would in a trial lesson, because even though, yes, it does matter how they play and if they're coachable, I can get a lot of that information out of the interview, or I can even have them submit a recording to me of them playing in advance, rather than spend that lesson time or that consultation time doing some sample teaching where now I'm giving my expertise and my time away for free. If you're a more established teacher, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be teaching for free on these initial trial lessons, because you already have a well of social proof. Your students have already written you testimonials by this point, or if they haven't, we should ask for them. Students that are coming to you know that they want to be working with you specifically because they've done their research. They know that you've got a thriving studio. They know that you've got these great testimonials. We should be interviewing them and make sure it's a mutual fit. We're not just taking anybody. In a trial lesson, this can absolutely have its place, especially for newer studios. So if you don't have a lot of student testimonials, if you don't have a lot of social proof yet, if you are still trying to build up that momentum and build up that demand, a free trial lesson can still be a really good option, absolutely. But eventually we want to shift ourselves to the consultation. The other thing that I really like about the consultation is it's very flexible. You don't have to put students in the time slot that is open in your schedule, meaning if you don't have an opening, if we're looking at summer and you know you're going to have some spots come June or July, but right now you don't, I'm not trying to fit them in those after school hours right now. I can still have the interview through Zoom or on a phone call at a different time, or even in the daytime hours. We've got a lot of flexibility there. So I also like that aspect of the consultation, that we're not trying to do something in person in my studio, blocking off a half an hour in the middle of my teaching time. It's just a little bit easier for us to coordinate calendars at that point. And also, some teachers like to move things around. So if they have a really ideal student and they need to fit them in at a certain time in their schedule, they might ask other students to shift things around. So what your current openings are may not actually reflect the availability you could have. And the consultation gives us a little time to figure out what that might need and what those next steps might be for them. As a quick aside on the consultation, if you want to hear them play, if you want to do more of a trial, if you're not sure you want to work with them long term, offer a trial month and have them pay for it. Have them pay for an entire month up front on your flat rate monthly tuition. Do the full 3 to 4 lessons that are happening in that month. And then at the end, schedule a phone call and do a quick assessment of, do we want to continue? Do we not want to continue? And it's okay at that point for you as a teacher even to say no, refer them out if it's not a good fit for you. But I think the consultations allow us the opportunity to have that conversation rather than doing even a paid trial lesson where we've got this one lesson that was purchased. And now I think sometimes it creates a little bit more um, pressure from the student because they have bought your service, they've paid you already, they're expecting to continue. Whereas the consultation is a little bit easier to say no if it's not a good fit.